Now let's come to the interviews as part of the selection process. An interview is simply a conversation between a potential candidate and relevant managers of an organization. Information is exchanged about the expectations of the organization and expectations of the candidate. And what is the purpose of this interview? The purpose of the interview is, amongst others, one, to determine if the applicant has the ability to perform the job, to determine if the applicant is motivated to be successful, and lastly, to determine if the applicant matches the needs of the organization. So the three purposes are very, very important. And during the interview, we've got two role players in an interview. We've got the interviewer and the interviewee. The interviewer is the business or the organization itself. And now, what will be the role of the interviewer? The interviewer or the business will be responsible for preparing good interview setting. That must be prepared way in advance, timelessly, of course. The interviewer must secure the venue where the interview will take place and so on. The interviewer must establish the job requirements and study the applicant's CVs. The interview must decide on the type of an interview, whether they are going to make use of what is called a structured interview or an unstructured interview or a mixed, the mixture of both, or, a different kind of interview, but they must decide on the type of interview they want to use. The interviewer must also establish a useful questioning. They must also decide on questions, prepare questions that are relevant, that are useful, that will assist them to select the best candidate way in advance. And before this one, it is also the responsibility of the interviewer to do it, to communicate with the interviewee, meaning to make the interviewee aware that you are expected to turn up for an interview on this day and give all of those details. Now, during the interview, the interviewer, which is the business, also is responsible to make sure that the candidate feels at ease. The interviewer must also be fair, and the interviewer must establish a good rapport and explain, of course, the purpose of the interview and so on to the interviewee. And lastly, at the end of the interview, the interviewer must provide candidates with an opportunity to ask questions. And immediately after that, the interviewer has got the responsibility to do what? To sit down now, compile a report on the process of interview, and also to check whether they've achieved what they wanted to achieve with the process of the interview. And now, contrary to that, let's look at the roles of the interviewee. The interviewee now is the candidate, him or herself. What would be the role of the interviewee in this instance? One, the interviewee must make sure that he or she is punctual for the interview. The interviewee must dress presentably. The interviewee must be confident. The interviewee must project good voice. The interviewee must maintain good eye contact, and so on. There are other roles that I did not add it up here, but you have a picture of what the role of the interviewee is all about in as far as interviews are concerned. Now let's come to another very important activity within the HR department, which is now the offering of an employment contract. Once the employee has accepted the offer made by the business, an employment contract must be drawn up between the two parties. The contract conditions or the requirements, legal requirements of the contract are that, 1, both parties must agree to the contents of the contract. Secondly, both parties must be legally capable of signing and carrying out the requirements of a contract. I mean, take for example, you cannot enter into a contract with, a minor, because that minor would not be legally capable even of signing such a contract. These are the legal requirements of a contract. A contract is binding to both parties. Once a contract is signed, legally it is now binding. A contract forms the foundation of the employment relationship, and a contract should always be in writing. And a contract, in fact, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, now we are linking also this with legislation. Basic Conditions of Employment Act, it sets the minimum standards of employment for employment contracts and should not be contravened. Now, according to the law, the contract should not contravene even the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. The HR must explain the terms and conditions of the employment contract. This is what is expected in as far as the law is concerned. The HR must explain the terms of conditions of the contract to the employee or to the candidate. Aspects of the contract may be renegotiated during the course of the employment relationship. Now it gives an opportunity to the employee to renegotiate, but of course during the employment relationship. And the contract should include even the code of conduct or even ethics. There are other information that I may not have included in the requirements of the contract, but it's very, very important to note that these are the legal requirements of an employment contract.